Alright, it's time for yet another Dev Diary review. It is currently Stellaris Dev Diary number 42. It's the ultimate question to everything. But, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, jokes aside, it is actually quite a good one this time around, as we are covering several fascinating little changes that we're going to see in Heinlein, mainly revolving both alliances, federations, planets, and a little bit of sector tweaking, so that's always nice. So let's start this one off here, and we got a couple of miscellaneous changes, but first of all, we're going to start off with the Federation and Alliance merger. Huge freaking deal. Alliances are dead. Yes, they are. Alliances have gone the same way as the embassies, as they will no longer exist anymore starting off in October when Heinlein is due out. Now, what will replace this? It will be the federations, and mainly this is a change that was, and I quote, when federations were given the ability to vote on invites and wars, alliances became a bit of an odd duck in Stellaris diplomacy. Now, the middle layer between loose diplomacy and defensive pacts and joined DOWs, they ended up in a little bit more of a weak form of federation. That is entirely true. They were terrible. They were awful. In all honesty, though, I'm not entirely sure if this is a great idea because you do lose that middle ground beyond defensive packs and all that. However, it is, it's fascinating to see. When we unlock the technology in the future for federations, we immediately will be able to invite another empire to a federation. We no longer need 4 dudes in an alliance, which is great. We're going to have empire federations off the start, and maybe this will allow us to, see some more federation mechanics in the future that are a little bit more worked out. Who knows what we'll have ahead of us? So I'm fascinated by this change. This should be cool. The technology is not required to invite new members or ask to join it, which is great as well. Now, with that comes the following, which is the Federation Association status. Another issue we ran into with the changes to diplomacy and Asimov is that alliances and federations had troubles bringing in new members since non-aggression pacts, defensive pacts, and guarantees were no longer possible with its outside powers, which is clear considering without those particular pacts and improvements, you would not be able to improve relationships in an effective way. You would need to bribe your way towards better statuses and then invite them to the so-called federation at that point. So, in this case, Federation Association status will be a feature. So this will be working in similarly to the invite federation. It can be offered to ask with any other federation member, but must be approved by unanimous vote. A country that has a federation association status is not actually part of the federation, but is a non-aggression pact with all non-federation members, and will gain trust up to a maximum value of 100. What is not actually stated is what the requirements are for the federation association status. So this is something that we'll probably see at some point in the future. What will trigger the ability to become a Federation Association status? And most importantly, how many federations can you be in at once? Which is probably also very important. And I just realized something else, but that's fine. And yeah, that's pretty much it on that one. What else do we have on this one? Okay, let's take a look here. Revoking association status can be done by majority vote or on the part of the association at any time they like. So that's cool. We got a bit of a picture here of what that's going to look like. A partnership with a Celestial Pact offer association status. We can offer them association status with our federation. This will increase their trust by 0.50 a month up to a maximum of 100. So that will take just under 20 months. Well, on 20 months, obviously, so just under 2 years to get that sorted out. Now we get to the more meteor changers that are not diplomatic in this particular one, and that's planet habitability changes. And before I continue on this one, there are some pretty damn big changes in here, and I will get to that one shortly. So in the past, they had the habitability wheel, the mechanic. Apparently, they weren't quite happy with it, and, it does make some sense in a degree, but apparently it's hard to keep track of planets and which relationship types, which relations to homeworld types you have, and, where you can put your species, and it caused apparently some weird cases where, quote-unquote, the desert is being perfectly fine for tropical inhabitants, or arid and tundra, which, in all honesty, doesn't make much sense. So apparently, right now they've changed the system where they use a climate group system where it's dry, wet, and cold. All planets are put in one of these three categories. Here's all 9. And basically, as long as your planet is within the climate category, that bonus will be 60%, which is pretty good. You know, you no longer have that 40% bonus or, you know, that 40% habitability cycle on that one. Main planet type is 80%, which is as before. Gaia is 100. Habitability for planets out of climates is 20%. So that's quite cool. As such, you no longer have to keep track of anything other than which climates your planet type has to know which particular world, blah, blah, blah. So that's cool. Now we get to something that's huge. Cool. We felt that the number of habitable planets in the galaxy was too large overall, which is in itself an interesting idea. Apparently the dev team is not happy with the amount of habitable planets in the galaxy. There's quite a lot of them. But that we couldn't really decrease it so long the player had only access to 1/7 of those star types, which will now become 1/9. So yeah, there you go. We also felt colonization tech gating would be rather arbitrary, particularly if you had a species suited to a particular planet type, but still couldn't colonize it due to the lacking tech. As such, and here we go, we've done away with the tech gating on colonization. That is a bomb drop and a half right there. We're removing all the gating on colonization. Basically removing 9 technologies from the game. That's huge. That is a massive, massive change. And it just changes so much in terms of colonization. Rapid colonization is now going to be a thing. You no longer have to sit on your ass somewhere in your empire is looking at this size 25 ocean world that you really badly want, and you got a 60% habitability bonus on it, but you can't colonize it because you don't have the colonization tech. It's gone. Forever. It's gone the way of the Alliance and the Embassy. I love Heinlein already. And instead instituted a 30% minimum habitability requirement to colonize a planet, which makes sense. Now, quickly turn back. Habitability of planets of other climates, either cold or dry, so, you know, that's 30%, and 60%. So if you're wet, you can colonize every single wet type. If you're dry, you can colonize every single dry type off the bat with a 60% habitability bonus. That's huge. That's massive. And then you do some habitability tech stuff, and then all of a sudden cold and dry will become available to you. It's like 2 techs away. That's amazing. That's such a huge thing. I'm looking forward to this. It's going to make all the planets so much more effective in the game, and rapid colonization is now going to be a thing. I'm looking forward to this. This is going to be absolutely amazing. I'm looking forward to when the beta patch drops sometime in the near future. Let's see. We also, with this change, we've majorly slashed the number of habitable worlds in the galaxy. Though if you prefer a galaxy lush with life, you'll be able to do so through a new option we outlined below. We are, of course, looking into and tweaking the effects that have less habitable worlds overall on Empire borders. Okay, so less habitable worlds in the game. Fair enough. With this tech, doesn't really matter. You'll be able to colonize everything within at least 200 years. So that's good. It will also mean that borders will be a lot more spread out, and I'm really hoping that the border tech stuff is gonna help quite a lot with that because of the changes in the previous patch, which was obviously the Asimov one, being further away, having your territory further away from your Empire borders would increase the influence cost that you had on basically colonization. So having a little bit further away is pretty big, especially if it's right at the start. I do hope that all starting planets do have a habitable planet next door they can use. It does make sense to have that initial colony spot out there, so that's something that I hope is still there, but we'll see when Heinlein hits the streets, so to speak. All right, so there's an old gamer's adage that more player choice is always better. I don't necessarily agree because fractured communities, and apparently they agree on that one as well, as adding unnecessary, uninteresting choices can just well bog the game down as can improve it. Excuse me. Ah, that's a good cup of tea. But in case of a galaxy setup as in Stellaris, it's pretty much true. With that in mind, the following new galaxy setup options are planned to be included in Heinlein, which is the maximum amount of fallen empires, which is a fixed number due to the way they spawn. A change of habitable world spawning. I like this one, so you can crank up sparse, maybe dense. Who knows? I'm looking forward to this. Having small islands of habitability is something that is cool, and it will basically scatter empires around. So species that cannot colonize, say, continental, will all of a sudden have a continental empire right in the middle of their space or their supposed space. So I just realized this means that outposts are going to make a bigger impact as well to the game. So, interesting. Allow advanced empires to start near players. Fair enough. Whether or not to use empire clustering, there is mods for this at the moment. I'm looking forward to see this implemented. Whether endgame pride crisis should be allowed to be appear. Okay, so in my case, this would always be on. If you've ever seen anything on my channel, pretty much half the videos that I have involve the endgame crises to begin with. Sector improvements. Now we get to the more interesting stuff. Since barely a day goes by without a new threat on the topic of sector and enslavement, we would, of course, be remiss to not deal with this particular bugbear. We intend to spend a considerable amount of time on the sector AI of Heinlein, but I'm going to go into specifics on bug-fixing AI improvements, but rather on a series of new toggles that we intend to introduce to give players more control on their sectors, in addition to the current redevelopment as respectile resource toggles, which, by the way, don't work half the time, at least in my experience. The following new toggles are planned for Heinlein. Whether or not a sector is allowed to enslave and emancipate. So that's cool, you know. Slaves are cool. I rarely play with them, but yeah, whatever. Whether or not a sector is allowed to build spaceport and construction ships, that one's quite big. Having construction ships flying around and doing stuff for you on the fly is nice. Spaceships, spaceports, of course, being able to build fleets on the fly is cool. One other sector is allowed to build military stations, which will replace the military sector focus. So the military sector focus does have the build military stations functionality in it. There's a piece of code for it in the script files. I've seen it. It doesn't really work at the moment, or at least it didn't work out at launch. Not entirely sure if that was the case. I do vaguely remember something being introduced in Clark for that, but I'm not entirely sure if that was the case. But yeah, this means that we can now build sectors with military stations, so that's cool. And finally, while we're at it, we're also discussing having a sector toggle for building and maintaining local defense fleets, but we don't think we'll have time for this in Heinlein. So that's huge. Local defense fleets. No longer will rogue Praetorian constructors enter your systems trying to build shit that you don't want there. So, local defense fleets, I love it. As long as, you know, the upkeep is, you know, a little bit lower, or it's just we cannot control them directly, or they are bound to their sectors. That'd be nice. Like local police, like military police, basically. That'd be cool. We'll see how this all pans out. Next week, apparently, they'll be talking about fallen empires, how they can, quote-unquote, awaken, and something I've never heard of, the war in heaven. I'm going to guess that the fallen empires are going to be able to go to war with each other, that they can go, quote-unquote, awake and fight a war in heaven. Thank you so much for watching. This has been Dev Diary 42 on Heinlein and a lot of miscellaneous changes that are coming up. Until next time, take good care of yourselves and, of course, each other.